Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. So in the last video we discussed the basics of test-driven development. Of course, there is much more to the discipline of writing tests, but I just wanted to give you an overview and make an argument of why tests are so important for microservices, specifically speaking microservices. They are important for every application, of course, but for microservices, where we want to have a continuous deployment environment, where one of our main goals is to increase velocity, then I need to have confidence in the system. And of course, I could test the whole system manually, but as the system grows, this takes just an impossible amount of time, right? Especially because I'm one person working on the project at the moment. So having automated tests just saves a lot of time in the future. Maybe we lose a little bit of time in the beginning until we get used to it, but then it saves us a lot of time afterwards. And with the main benefit of that, if the tests pass, I can rest assured that a good amount of functionality in my program is working as expected, right? I cannot ensure that everything is working as expected, but a good amount is working. So with that in mind, I have two little things I wanted to make a brief comment about just before we jump into our first functionality or our first tests. And the first one is that maybe you are wondering, where is the write automated tests subtask, right? So where is it? And it doesn't make sense to have it, right? Because I would create a subtask, write automated tests, if they were not an integral part of my development workflow. Now, I cannot start a task if I don't have a test for that task, right? So it doesn't make sense for me to write or to create the task, write automated tests, because that is going to decouple testing from implementation. And I don't want to decouple testing from implementation. I want to, before I start the functionality, write the tests for it, right? So I will not create the task, because we will do that at the beginning of every task that we start to work on. The second thing that I realized is that I forgot to create here two issues that I think will be quite important for us. The first one, maybe I create here in the new window. The first one is that as a user, I want to sign up with or through social media accounts, right? Or let's say sign up, through social media accounts, so that I can easily use my other accounts to sign up or to have access to the application, right? So for example, signing up via Facebook or via Gmail or via GitHub or Twitter or whatever. So here I'm gonna put like social media accounts as an umbrella term. Of course, GitHub is not a social media, neither is Gmail, but you get the idea. So just that we know that we have to think about how we are going to integrate this OpenID Connect functionality to our application, right? So I'm going to create this, and I'm also going to create another task, which is as a user, right? I want to sign in with my social media accounts so that I don't have to provide my email and password every time, right? Okay, so we've just added these two, and the backlog here, what I'm going to try to do is to somehow keep it ordered by priority, right? So it's good that we have this two here, because we know what we are going to implement in the future, but they are going to come at a later stage, right? I don't want to focus too much into on them now, because there are other tasks, other things that I think it would add more value at the moment, so that we can have a somewhat complete package of functionality working. Otherwise, it simply becomes too much of authentication and you may lose your interest, right? So I prefer to work a little bit more on this holistic approach. So yeah. One other thing, which is a very nice thing, so I bought the domain for our application, is this one, unsocial.app, right? Of course, there's nothing here now at the moment. It's just going to be hanging and probably just give some information that was not able to connect or to find the domain or whatever. But our app is going to be hosted in this domain. So we will have a dev.unsocial app, we have a staging.unsocial app, and we have a normal unsocial.app, right? So just to keep you posted, that this will also enable us to have a very early deployment of our application. So it will be live very early and you'll be able to access it over your browser as well if you're interested. Now I'm also thinking that I will need to put some cap here because it costs money, right? And I need to maintain this somehow. I need to pay for the infrastructure that we will be using. We'll get to this point. I will probably use Google Cloud, maybe AWS, but I'm more tending towards Google Cloud. And I need to pay. I need to pay for the computer. I need to pay for the storage. I need to pay for all these little things that are going to be required for us to have the application up and running. And maybe I need to limit maybe the number of users that can sign up, or the number of posts that you can provide. I don't really want to give any hard limit, but the problem is that if you can post images and videos, and some bot can post images and videos, that can very quickly become quite expensive in terms of buckets, right? In terms of file storage. So there are a few issues that I'm just communicating in advance. So not going to be a problem for a couple of weeks, I think. But until then, yeah, I mean, we'll get to this. We'll discuss this when we get there. At the moment, it's very, for me, I like the clean structure and the fact that I'm forced to use HTTPS, right? This is a .app domain, and for .app domains, you need to have an HTTPS connection. Okay, that much said, we are now going to start with our first task. So this is the first one, right? So I'm going to move this pub to my in progress, and I'm going to start with validating and sanitizing the input from the user. So if I come to my IDE, if you still remember that it exists, right? Because we didn't touch it for quite some time. Then I just want to make a brief note on how the Express works. So the application works under the hood, right? So if I have an application, as you can see here, my app.ts, then the application is composed of mostly routes and middlewares, right? So middlewares are standardized, or are simply functions that are applied to a route or to all the routes, right? So a middleware can be, for example, the body parser that we are going to use in order to make sure that we can access the request that is coming to us, so that we can access the property, so the body of the request. Then this middleware is going to be used in pretty much every route, because except of course those routes that are simply a GET request, then the body is going to be empty. But for all POST requests, we are going to use this middleware, so we will declare it in our app file. Now, can I declare it now? Of course not, because I don't have a test for it, right? So, but I'm just telling you in advance that we are going to do it. So another middleware that we will probably implement in the future is some middleware to handle errors, right? So we want to have a standardized interface to communicate with our external world from this application, And as such, we need to have some standardization of the errors, because I can have different types of errors. So body parser is going to give me some errors in a very specific shape. If I throw an error with a string, that's going to be an error in another shape. If I throw an error with an object, that's going to be an error in another shape. So I need to somehow standardize, and this is going to be done via the error handler middleware. And the, of course, most important part of my application is the routes, right? So I cannot have an application without a route. This is our first route, and this tells us, okay, for every route, just send it back a 200 with an empty body, and this will always be true, right? Whatever route we try to access within our application. Good. The routes, then we are going to be working with them, I think, most of the time, and some middleware as well very soon. So that much said, I want to start working directly on our tests. So just to keep the code a little bit organized, we are implementing the signup functionality, right? So that's a route. So I'm going to create a routes directory, and within my routes directory, first directory I'm creating is the tests directory. And no other file nor anything, signup.test.ts, right? That's the first file that I am working with. And if we come here to, we can reuse a little bit the structure from our previous test. So the imports are going to be the same, except for the app, which I need to go one directory up. So let me also, okay, now maybe we are working with the validation, right? We are working with the validation. So let's see how much we can use from here. So how does a test, how is a test structured in Jest? So in Jest we have, well, it's a very complete testing suite, right? So, or suite, I don't know how is the correct pronunciation. If I say suite, is like it's dressing up, so maybe suite. The idea is that I can do some before all setup, I can do some before each setup, I can do some after each setup, and I can do some after all setup. So this is going to be important when we have database connection, right? So before all, let's say I want to clean up the database, start the database connection, right? Then before each, I want to clean up the database so that I don't have any remaining unnecessary or unwanted entities there, and then my tests fail because of inter-test dependencies, right, or side effects. And I have an after all, which I can then close the database connection, right? So when I have some tests that involve connecting to the database, and then this is going to come quite soon when I want to save the user information to the database, then I'm going to implement these lifecycle methods, right? For us now, for the moment, we are interested in the test that we want to pass. So the general structure for a Jest test is I provide the name, and then I provide a callback function, which is going to be my test itself. So let's have a look at the story or at the task, and let's think which kind of parameters, which kind of body attributes we are going to receive in our application. So the first thing is that, well, let's think about how a body request would look like. So my body request, my request.body, not my body request, it would look something like this. I'm going to have an email, which is going to be a string, and I'm going to have a password, which is also going to be a string, right? At the moment, I think we don't get anything else. Maybe we could also require a second password to confirm that the user has matching passwords, but this is becoming less and less common, at least as far as I observe in other websites. So we have two attributes that we are going to receive over our request to the signup route. So let's write the first one. It should return something if the email is not valid, right? Should return something if the email is not valid. What should it return? Well, an error, maybe. No, right? That's too generic. It doesn't tell me anything about the behavior of the application. Whatever error I throw, this test is going to pass, and that's horrible because the test can fail, or there can be n number, or that can be n causes for my request to fail. And if I break something inside my code and I send an invalid email, then this test will pass, not because it's throwing the error from the invalid email, but because it's throwing the error from some other unrelated part of my code. So we also need to be specific about what we want to provide as an output for our code, right? What do we want to, which kind of error do we want to raise before we, or when the user provides invalid input? So because of course I don't have all of this in my mind, and neither should you, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in HTTP we have a whole range of errors, right? So informational purposes are not relevant for us. Successful responses are fine. We will use this a lot. Successful responses, 201 to create, right? 201 is successfully created. 204 I think is successfully deleted. We have redirect request, which may be useful at some point. We have client errors and we have server errors, right? Client errors. What is client errors? It's something that is caused by an external client interaction, right? So it's not a problem from within the server. Let's say the server crashes or there is a bad functionality in the server. That would be a server error. But a client error is the user provides me a bad password, or the user tries to access a resource to which him or her doesn't have permission, or the user tries to access a URL that doesn't exist, right? So these are all client errors. So let's have a look at the client errors that we have. So 400, bad request. The server could not understand the request due to invalid syntax. Okay, this seems to be a good error code for us, but let's see if we have anything more. So unauthorized, not the case. Payment required, not the case. Forbidden, not the case. Not found, not the case. Method not allowed, not the case. Not acceptable. Actually, this method not allowed could be interesting for us, right? We will keep that in mind because if I come here, I could also write the test. It should return a 405, should return 405 for get requests to the signup route. I just want to inform my user, okay, you are not allowed to perform a get request on my signup route. So this is also a test that is interesting for us to write. Now, you immediately notice that I am violating a little bit the 3 laws of test-driven development that I mentioned in the previous video. But for me, these are standards that I want to adopt, of course, and maybe as I get better with test-driven development, we'll naturally tend towards this. Now I'm using this more in terms of documentation. I just don't want to forget, right? I don't want to forget that I want to write a test like this. And for get requests, for put requests, right? For put requests and for delete requests. And even for patch requests, right? For patch requests. So now, as you can see, this is getting quite polluted, right? Maybe we can summarize this into a for non-post requests to the signup route, because I don't need to have a test. I don't need to have a test for each of these because the behavior is exactly the same. I want my application to send a, or to send a 405 for any request that is not a post request, right? So, okay, good. That will capture pretty much everything. We can run, if you look here, we can run a bunch of super test statements. So I can just go ahead and write app.get, app.post, app.delete, and blah, 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 and ensure that everything here is going to be working, or all these non-post requests are going to return me a 405. Okay. Okay, not acceptable. That's not the case. Conflict gone, length required, precondition failed, payload too large, URI too long, unsupported media type, range not satisfiable, expectation failed, misdirect request, unprocessable entity. Well, maybe this is maybe this tells us a better, gives us more information about the error, right? 422 unprocessable entity request was well formed but was unable to be followed due to semantic errors. And that's the case. If the email is not valid, that's a semantic error, right? If the password is not valid, that's a semantic error. So I kind of like this code. I think it's also well used. The other one's unavailable for legal reasons, maybe at some point. But for us, I think the 422 is what we want to go with, right? So should return 422 if the email is not valid, right? So, okay, then how do we test this? Well, we'll use, of course, super test. So I will just type this as async because I want to await the, so what happens if I don't mark it as async? Let's do it like this, right? Let's do it like this. And you see what's going to, I'm going to get an interesting error message. So here I'll just mark expect true to be truthy so that it passes, right? Or maybe I can even comment this test out for the moment. We will also implement it. But for the moment, let me just comment it out. Let me just here run some prettier, npm run prettier fix. I remember that we are, oops, where am I? Aha, yeah, I need to go to my auth directory, right? So npm run prettier fix. So nothing that I had to. So good. Then, yeah, I think it should be working fine. So let's go for the should return 422 if the email is not valid. I have my super test, right? So that's going to be request to app dot and this is going to be a post to my signup route. Now, what is my signup route? Well, I didn't think about it, but I would enforce that we'll have a structure like this. API is going to follow the entire backend server. So all the microservices should be prefixed with API, so that we know that when we provide a request to a certain domain, if the request is prefixed, or if the first part of the request, the request URL is API, then this is going to be forwarded to the backend, right? Then I have the name of my service off, and then I have my route sign up, right? So that is my first, or that's at least I think how we can structure our routes to begin with. So the first thing I want, the second thing I want to do is I want to, of course, remove this generic route, because this is not going to do us any good. So if I post a request, right, like this, let's see what happens if I run npm run jest. Oh, sorry, npm run test. Let's see what's going to tell me. Of course, it's going to fail, right? Of course, it's going to fail. But yeah, of course, expected 200 okay, got 400 not found, 404, that's for the index. So, and the signup test interestingly enough, it passed, right? It passed because, okay, so is there any problem going on here? Is my app not able to perform such a request? No, it's able to perform, but it responds with an error, right? It responds with a 404. Now, let me do here one little change, and my index.test.ts is not relevant anymore. Why is it not relevant anymore? Because my app, I simply removed its functionality here, right? So I don't want to have this catch all at the moment, maybe later. So of course I want to have a 404 route that is going to send a good response to my client, but for the moment we'll remove everything so that we can focus on our code here. Okay, so I'm in the routes directory, I'm in the signup test, and I post here to this API, to this API/off/signup. So let's run again the test. Right now I have only one test, and of course it passed, although it doesn't return a 422, right? And as you can see here also, just did not exit 1 second after the test run has completed. Now this is a problem because I'm just not marking this as async and await. So this request is hanging, right? This request is hanging behind the scenes. So if I run the test again, now I think it should pass and it should exit. Okay, that's good enough for us. Now let's make the test fail, right? Because we can write the test so we can keep writing a test until it fails. It has passed, but now it's going to probably fail. Oh, there you go, it fails as expected, right? Expected a 422, got a 404. Now 404 is of course the standard response if the route is not found. So we don't have a route. So this test can never pass, right? So we need to create a route so that our test passes. And let's come here to these routes and create our signup.ts route. Good. So for the signup.ts route, then what we can already work with is we for sure need express from express. And why do we need that? Because we want to create what is called a router, right? So I could come to my app.ts file and I could start writing app.get some signup route and then do these and so on and so on. And then I would have the again app.get some other route and then app.get some other route and app.post suddenly some other route. So this is just not scalable because we'll have like 500, 1,000 routes maybe in some other applications with some complex functionality. So we want to keep things clean. So we're going to create this routes directory, and within here we are going to create a router. Now how does the router work? Is very straightforward. Const signup router is equal to express.router. Okay, that's all I need to do. Now I can also have the same structure, signup router dot get, right? And this is going to be my path API or API/off/signup, and then do something here, right? And then I can export my signup router. So export default signup route. Okay, and now if I want to use the signup router in my main application, all I need to do is to come here and import. So let me do a little bit of, for me, I particularly like this structure of having an index.ts file here, where I actually export all the defaults as named export, so that it's easier for us. Oops, that's not s, it's from signup.ts, right? So now the default here, which is going to be my signup router, this signup router is a named export from within the routes package, right? So here I can import signup router from .routes, right? So I like this, keeps a clear structure and it tells us, okay, I I'm importing this router from the folder, and I'm going to use this in my application. So now if I write app.use signup router, then this route is going to work, right? I will be able to make get requests to /API/auth/signup. Now I'm not interested in get requests yet, so let's keep writing our code so that it can pass, right? app.post, so that my test can pass, /API/auth/signup. And what is my test again? So should return 422 if the email is not valid, right? So okay, it is expecting a 422 at the moment. Let's make the test pass. So here I'm going to have the structure is that then I receive the request and the response, right? Objects that are passed as input as parameters to my callback function within the route, and then I can simply say res.status 422.send. Let's say I'm going to send an empty body as a response. Okay, I'm going to do a little change here to my jest setup, because I just don't want to have the need to rerun the test every time, because the tests are going to fail a lot right at the beginning. So I'm going to add these two flags here that I wrote down in a helper file here to guide this video a little bit better. So the watch all is going to basically keep jest running until we kill it, right? And it's going to watch all the tests. If some test changes, then it's going to rerun jest, and that's great because we will be writing and going back and forth between tests and production code a lot in this project. So this for sure better for us. And the no cache flag is a flag that allows jest to better handle TypeScript within this watch all framework, right? So there will also be cases where we will do changes in our tests, and these changes are not going to be reflected in so we'll see that the tests are not rerunning. Then we need to simply kill the jest process and start it again. But this no cache helps us to make sure that, or to at least improve that jest reruns itself, and yeah, as long as I change the files. Okay, let's see how this works. So let me increase this a little bit maybe. Now the sign up test should pass. Oh, it passed. Okay, very nice. So of course it passed, because I'm sending a 422 for whatever request I'm sending to the route. That's not what I want, right? So I want to send 422 only if the email is invalid. So I don't have an email even. And how can I send back a 422, right? So my code is, do I need to write more, do I need to write more code to my test? No, I don't need to write more code to my test. My test is right. If there is no email, and maybe here I can even make it more clear by adding a body, an empty body to my, oops, I think that it's not body, it's what, send? Exactly, yeah, it's send. I can make it even more clear by adding a .send to my chain of commands, so that to ensure that I am sending an empty data object. All right, so this should not be the case. This should not pass. Why is it passing? Because we are not doing any validation whatsoever, right? And for us to do the validation, what we have to do is we need to have something that is called a body parser. So what is a body parser? Let's go back to my app.ts here, and this is the case where we are going to start using the body parser from so well, there is a body parser package, so I'm just showing to you body parser express, right? This is not necessary, it's not necessary. I think this one, or even the documentation from Express. I think they should be relatively equivalent. So this is Node.js body parsing middleware. Right, parse income request bodies in a middleware before your handlers available under the rec.body property. Okay, we have JSON body parser, which is going to be the one that we will use most often. Right, we'll normally use send our request in a JSON format, but we also have other types of body parser. So just for you to be aware that it exists, right? I think the documentation is the same, right? You just the source for the documentation is the same. So how do we use that? Well, very simple, npm install body parser, right? So I can kill my jest process, npm install body parser. Give a couple of seconds, gonna install it. Okay. So how do I actually use the body parser? Well, of course, everything is going to be in the documentation. So I need in my application to import something from body parser. And this something is going to be my JSON body parser, right? And then right after I start my application, I'm going to tell it, and then here I add maybe a couple of comments. Nah, doesn't need to have comments. App.use JSON, and that's a function, right? So with that, I'm going to be able to access my data that is received via a request in that request.body object. All right, so let's give it a try here. I'm going to have a console.log rec.body. All right, let's see what is going to happen. Oops. Well, let me run it again. I mean, I just want to make sure that it's consistent. Yeah, updated one package. Let's see what happens if I run my tests. Oh, okay. It received an empty body. Very nice. So what if I pass something else to this body, right? Something, and that's going to be something. How is it going to look like? Okay, received seems to be correctly processed. So very nice. Now, of course, I want to send an empty array to begin with, or empty object to begin with. So here in my body, what I can do is I can access the rec.body property. So if not, right? If not rec.body.email, then I want to send res.status 422.send an empty object. And now my tests are going to pass, right? My tests are going to pass. Here I can send I don't need this, right? I can just send something. But now my tests here, they should correctly pass, right? And it's interesting, why was the test passing before? That's because I was sending a 422 for every status code, right? So I actually got a little bit lost here, and that's maybe one of the ideas. I didn't make the test fail before, so let's make the test fail before. So here I'm just gonna res.send, and then of course this is going to make the test fail, right? Okay, I got a 200. Okay, and of course I don't want to have a 200. Okay, so let's add that little snippet. Oops. Yeah, there we go. And now my test should pass again. Oh, it passed. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop saying this. Oh, it passed. But I hope you understand the idea, right? So we are now able to develop first the development that we want, or first the functionality that we want within the test, and then to implement the functionality within our application, right? So I think I'm running a little bit long in this video. Maybe it makes sense that I split it up and we continue over the next video to implement a more robust way of validating the input that we want in our application, right? Or that we want to receive in our application. So for the moment, I will stop the video. I'll just start recording immediately the next one, but so that we have a clean cut point where we will now come back and implement the actual validation of our request.body. So far, we have done a very basic, of course, it's not scalable enough. So in the next video, we will migrate to using the express validators from the express validator package. Yeah. Thank you very much. See you soon. Bye-bye.